when you start.
Okay. All right, so I'm Tyler Wonke, an MD, MBA candidate at Northwestern University. This is Jason and Curtis, and we are Innoblative, innovating the treatment of breast cancer. So 1 in 8 women in this room will get breast cancer at some point in their lifetime. It's the most common cause of cancer in the United States in women. Every year, about 250,000 women get diagnosed in the United States alone. And globally, this number is almost 1.7 million. This is also a number that's growing at about 1 to 3% every single year. If a woman's diagnosed early, which is the majority of women, she has a few options. Unfortunately, they're not great options. She can get a mastectomy, removal of the entire breast, or she can get what's called breast conservation treatment. A mastectomy, removal of the entire breast, is effective, but for early stage patients, it leaves a crippling cosmetic outcome and is overkill, as the rates of mortality of these patients hasn't been shown to be any better than more local treatment, namely breast conservation treatment. Breast conservation therapy is the combination of lumpectomy, removal of just the tumor, plus, to get at any residual cancer that may be left in the cavity, 5 to 7 weeks of radiation therapy. Now, this has been shown to be just as effective as mastectomy, but there's a few major problems. First, 1 in 5 patients needs a re-operation due to cancer found in the margin after surgery. Specifically, a pathologist will take the tissue sample from surgery, and they'll take it to the lab, and they'll look at it under the microscope. And if that tumor is close to or touching the margin, that patient gets a re-operation. This re-operation costs just as much as the first. It takes more tissue, if not the whole breast from the woman. And then lastly, we're not even sure then that we've gotten all the cancer. Even then, that patient still may need radiation. Radiation itself has its own series of problems. Namely, it's lengthy. The average course is 5 to 7 weeks of that patient returning every day for treatment. And women who can't afford this schedule because they live in rural areas or developing countries are generally forced to get a mastectomy. It's also costly, at about 3 to 4 times the cost of the lumpectomy surgery itself. And lastly, it's dangerous. We knew about the burns and fibrosis and some of the other short-term side effects with radiation, but what we're just starting to really understand is the long-term effects. This New England Journal of Medicine article published within the last 13 months actually illustrated the long-term 30-year significant recurrence of cancer and heart attack after radiation therapy. We didn't even know about this 2 years ago. Lastly, women who are pregnant, have lupus, certain heart conditions, or have already received a round of radiation therapy are not eligible for another round. And these women are generally forced to get a mastectomy as well. All these things considered, it's no wonder that nearly 30% of women fail to finish their course of radiation therapy, the very course that's supposed to be getting them better. When I started working on this project, one of my best friend's moms opened up to me about her personal battle with cancer. And Jeannie told me about how she got diagnosed early, she got the lumpectomy, and she got the radiation. And then for the next few weeks, she suffered with a variety of short-term side effects, including the fibrosis and the burns that I talked about earlier. And then a few years later after that, she recurred with cancer in the same spot. And she was not a candidate for breast conservation treatment because she had already had a course. She was forced to have a mastectomy.
Are all breast cancer patients facing surgical procedure, or are some portion of them that candidates for chemotherapy or other drug-based treatment?
Sure. So in general, the doctors will split apart chemotherapy, which is more of a systemic treatment to treat cancer that may be in any portion of the body, from the local treatment, which is the surgery and the radiation. And in general, the early stage patients, the majority of patients are candidates for surgical, either mastectomy or breast conservation treatment. And then the later stage patients have surgery.
It's out of the 250,000 new cases each year, what percentage of those actually get chemotherapy treatments versus actually surgery and radiation?
Just to clarify, what we're actually targeting, there are 3 essential pieces of the cancer when a woman is diagnosed. You have the actual tumor in the breast environment. Once you remove the tumor, there's residual cancer that was part of that original mass. And then chemotherapy is treating the little bits of cancer that the blood flow has moved throughout the body. So we're targeting a different part of the cancer. Chemotherapy is separate, and we're talking to breast surgeons who are not in charge of the chemotherapy. That's usually pushed off to a radiation oncologist. And Tyler can talk more about what that experience is like for the patient.
Yeah, that's accurate. So typically 2/3 of women in the United States are diagnosed early stage and are amenable for sure for surgical treatment. And the chemotherapy is sort of outsourced to a medical oncologist for them to deliver. And they'll take the tissue and
So
do
all
the
women diagnosed with breast cancer, you have a surgical procedure, followed with either radiation, or chemotherapy.
I'm not going to say all, but certainly of the early stage patients, the treatment is either mastectomy or breast conservation surgery.
And the radiation and the chemotherapy are targeting different parts of cancer. So chemotherapy is throughout the entire body, little pieces of cancer in the bloodstream that move out, whereas the radiation is targeting the residual cancer in the breast, that we are also targeting the different type of energy.
So to bring it back, what we're talking about here is a woman gets the tumor taken out, and just to treat that residual cancer right there locally in the breast, she gets radiation therapy for 5 to 7 weeks every single day. Did that answer your question? Chemotherapy is completely separate, and we don't have to discuss that in this presentation. It doesn't affect the treatment for local.
No, I understand.
So that's why we came in, and that's why we formed Innoblative. And we've designed a novel medical device that fits in that cavity right after breast surgery and delivers a very precise dose of radio frequency energy to ablate or kill any of that residual cancer in the margin in about 15 minutes instead of weeks for a fraction of the cost and without the use of any dangerous ionizing radiation. Here's a quick video of what the procedure looks like. Here's a woman with early stage breast cancer. The surgeon goes in and does the lumpectomy procedure just like he or she always would. We're not changing anything there. But to target any residual cancer left, instead of closing the patient and giving them radiation, our device gets inserted in there, emits radio frequency energy to safely destroy that removed tissue, and then it's removed in 15 minutes, and the patient's done. So I've been mentioning radio frequency energy. What is this? Well, radio frequency energy, or radio frequency ablation, is using alternating current in the radio frequency range to locally generate heat that coagulates or kills tissue in a very controlled local fashion. And this has actually been the standard of care for multiple cancers, including liver cancer, for some time now. You can actually see a picture over there on the other side of a ablation probe going into a solid liver tumor, expanding its electrodes around it, and delivering radio frequency energy to kill that liver tumor. Our team's very own Dr. David Mavi is the chief of surgical oncology at Northwestern, and he's been studying radio frequency ablation for liver cancer for decades. And it was his confidence with the modality that led us to really expand this technology into the breast setting. As you can see, when we're compared right against radiation therapy, we take something that normally takes 5 to 7 weeks and condense it down to 15 minutes during their first initial surgery. And the cost is reduced by nearly a magnitude. We talked a little bit about going, how it used to be all about the mastectomy, and then it moved towards taking out the tumor and having external beam radiation, general radiation therapy. And now some players have picked up on the idea of maybe we can go more local. And that's where companies like Zoft and Mammocyte came in. They're targeting that local breast by inserting devices into the breast cavity that emit ionizing radiation. And so they're going at it from a local perspective, but you still have the ionizing radiation, and the capital expenditure for that equipment is still very expensive. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars. We hope to play in the upper right here to be the true local, non-ionizing, safe option for patients. And you can see there's one other device kind of creeping up in there, and I'll get to that in just a second. The point of this slide is to show that radiofrequency ablation has already been used in the breast setting. Namely, there's been a clinical trial with 10 years of data that's actually taken liver ablation probes, just like the one I showed you earlier, and adapted them to the breast cavity. And they've been able to show a 91% reduction in the very reoperation rate I told you about earlier. Also, the 9-year recurrence from this study came out at 1.7%, which is right in range with mastectomy and breast conservation surgery. The only problem is that they're just trying to use off-the-shelf liver ablation probes, as you can see in the upper right. And when you look at these probes, they're these long probes made for deep percutaneous surgery in the liver. And you can see a surgeon struggling with one on the upper right. When you try to use this in the breast cavity, it's quite awkward, and that has led to an adoption problem. Furthermore, the actual energy distribution from this probe comes from a set of electrodes that are a predetermined shape and size. And they're really made to circle around a solid tumor in the liver, not for the post-lumpectomy breast cavity, like the clinical setting we're talking about here. To get around these workarounds, a surgeon must actually subjectively place sutures in that cavity and cinch it down to make pretend this cavitary setting is a solid tumor. If he or she misses that one wall with cancer, you just missed the whole point of the procedure.
So their patent suite doesn't include anything like what you're doing, that they don't have any?
Their solution to the problem that Tyler is discussing is another workaround. So right now they're teaching surgeons how to make sutures and collapse that cavity. What they've done from an IP perspective is add on to the liver probe that you see with another device which attaches to that probe and is a vacuum. So it sucks down the tissue to do the same thing the surgeons are doing right now with sutures and to create a cavity that looks more like a solid tumor using a vacuum, which from an IP perspective is an incremental improvement, is protectable, is an invention that makes a lot of sense to their team of developers. But from a surgeon's perspective, that's just another workaround. It's just a technology fix for a surgical workaround that is currently a surgical fix. Our probe is specifically designed for the breast cavity, so no workarounds would be necessary.
Yeah, so from what we've seen in our own IP discussion, it looks like companies are trying to just fix the workarounds and try to, just keep using their liver probe devices instead of actually innovating a new device.
So the elasticity of their patent suite doesn't go into any other parts of the body, or
Well,
how to address that?
not that it doesn't go to any other parts of the body, but it's that their mechanical solution is only covered to encompass really what that device looks like. And our IP is around, well, we'll get to what it actually is later, but our IP is around a specific device that is made for this clinical setting and a method to address that in the breast cavity.
I'll speak further to what our actual IP covers, but it's important to understand that none of these companies are trying to patent radio frequency. You can't actually patent the energy. The issue that all of these companies, including us, are facing is how do you make a probe that fits a particular shape? And these companies that came before us have really been focusing on solid tumors, where nobody has created probes specifically for the breast cavity until now.
So as opposed to the liver ablation probe here that you can see is missing the cavity, our probe, this is an early rendering, actually in our electrical property, fits that cavity to ensure that you get a full circumferential ablation of the breast cavity. Of course, we've talked to a few surgeons about this. Dr. Nora Hansen is the chief of breast surgery at Northwestern, and she applauds us mostly for the ease of use of our device and what it would do to plug into current clinical protocol. Dr. Kevin Bethke is the busiest breast cancer surgeon at Northwestern and the most experienced, and he has already said he would use this device if we can continue to show the outcome data. We also have a very niche opportunity in the external environment for this. The Prime 2 study literally came out weeks ago and showed that for earlier low-risk patients who are a little older, they may not even need radiation therapy per se. In fact, the chance of mortality, whether they had it or not, if they're 65 years and older and low risk, there was no difference in mortality. But their chance of recurrence was 4 times higher. So we think this is a patient population that we can actually get into for early clinical trials to offer them something to get at that residual cancer without having to compete against the standard of care being radiation therapy. So a very fortuitous series of events. Our go-to-market system is simple. We have a disposable probe that plugs into a reusable energy generator. In terms of the business model and how we translate this, we'll sell this disposable probe via a contracted sales force to hospitals for about $1,000 to $3,000 each. The COGS, we've already confirmed with our advisors who have started similar companies, will be around $200. So the gross margin on each probe is about 80 to 93%. After this, we'll use this disposable with currently existing generators that are in almost every operating room in the entire country to get to market.
Why is the price so, why is it between 1 and 3,000? Why is it between 1 and 1,250? What was the elasticity in that price?
Sure. So I'll get to it later when I get to the slide that shows it, but it's going to depend really on which code we go for and which initial CPT code essentially we can build off of. So we actually think we can use currently existing codes and get around closer to like 1,500 on reimbursement. And then once we develop our own special codes, we can demand a higher price.
What number did you use to get your gross margin? Did you use 1,000 or 3,000 or the median?
Both. 80% to 93% is $1,000 to $3,000.
It's only 13% difference between 1,000 and 3,000 each. It costs the same cost of goods. Or not doing
So 200. So COGS is 200. Off $1,000 is 80%,
Okay.
and then off of 3,000, I think that should be 93%.
Okay.
So that's pretty much the range we think we can get, which is really right in line with industry. I mean, we've talked to business advisors who have said, wow, the actual price of this could go up a lot higher because you're replacing a $13,000 problem. It's just a matter of getting new codes to support that. And right now we're looking at the near term, what codes can we use that already exist before we expand to new codes, which is right in line with our advisors have done for their previous companies. Later on, we expect to actually bring our own generator to market once we've sort of gotten some initial adoption with higher features that can actually detect signals from the probe to ensure that ablations happen, and other functionality too. And you can see what the COGS on a device like that would be about $6,000, and the current market rate is anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000 for those generators. So it'll switch from sort of a razor blades model to something where you're actually generating revenue.
So initially, you're going to be using somebody else's generator.
Correct.
Okay.
Which has been done many times in the space.
And just to hone in on that difference, as Tyler pointed out, initially when we're using existing generators, we have a unidirectional communication where the generator is creating the energy goes into the body, and that's great. But in the future, we can create bidirectional communication where the surgeon's actually getting feedback. That would be fantastic.
And where are you at in development of that?
We have a whole set of slides on that, but really we're focusing on the development of the disposable right now to bring to market. But we do have contract manufacturers lined up for both the disposable and the generator system. We just haven't been focusing on the generator yet. More of the high margin disposable.
What does that mean, have them lined up? You have contracts?
So we've gotten quotes set on the table to see what it would cost to do that work. I'll actually show you a quote later from the disposable, which is again what we're looking for right now is the disposable to get to market. Vic Malik, I'll just quickly mention, is one of our advisors, who we'll talk about later, but he's a sort of distribution specialist in the medical device industry, and he's actually the guy who will likely help us contract out the sales force with the initial distribution. So in terms of the market, there's about 130,000 patients of the patients I mentioned earlier who would be eligible for this treatment today. There's already clinical guidelines saying that these patients are eligible for local treatment. And so this is really our immediate target market in the United States. Multiply times a probe price of $1,000 to $3,000, again, initial market price, brings a market in the US of $130 to $390 million. However, the global market is much bigger. And we've estimated that if you include a lot of the global markets, including Europe, Japan, we think that the global market might be closer to even up to $1.8 billion, just in breast cancer. That said, we're starting to look into new indications that our technology might be able to fit and expand the market into other
How did you arrive at those numbers?
Sure, so you just saw the US one before, and the overall global market is about a little over 7 times what the US is, but the margins aren't quite as high, so we took a very considerable cut to the margins to bring that number down. Europe in specific is double the size of the United States. So really that's the first market we'd be looking at.
And when Tyler says the margins aren't as high, the reason for that is the reimbursement isn't as high per procedure based on the way that healthcare works in other markets.
Now, that doesn't even consider doing your own generator.
That's right, correct. This is just the
This is just
disposable.
the probe.
We haven't even factored in the generator yet. Now, we've used that price point, 1 to 2,000, and an adoption curve that we think we can believe to bring to market this device, at least in the beginning, for a smaller number of procedures, about a little over 1,000 in the first 2 years, and then ramp it up to almost 50,000 procedures 6 years out. And this is pretty much what the revenue looks like with EBIT forecasted in the beginning. And we were sort of surprised that we might even be able to get up to 28 million in 6 years after launch. And then we looked at an analog. Mammocyte is one of these intraoperative ionizing radiation solutions that I talked about earlier. Remember those players that were going into the cavity and delivering ionizing radiation? Well, after they got FDA clearance with just a 25-patient trial, 510K clearance, which is the fast pathway, they were able to garner almost 45,000 procedures in the first 6 years. That's like almost 10 to 50% of the market. And the reason was because they were giving surgeons the option to take more control of their patients with their device and garner revenue from that. And that's exactly what we're offering for our device. We're offering the surgeons the opportunity to take more control over their patient's care and garner revenue from that.
How well funded were they?
So, I mean, they were pretty well funded before they sold for $160 million to SciTech, but they went through at least through Series A for that, and were pretty well funded. But at the time of their acquisition, they were only generating $5.8 million in revenue, and their net income was negative $14 million, and they sold for $160 million to SciTech in 2005. So, why isn't nanostate the standard of care now? Why isn't everyone using it now? Well, because it's concentrating such a high density of ionizing radiation in a short period of time. Namely, it's still 5 days, twice a day. We're talking about doing something in 1 day. They do it in 5 days, twice a day. The side effects are terrible, and namely 5 times what external beam radiation. So they're sort of falling off the map, and Northwestern doesn't even touch this. So I told you a little bit about the clinical need, the market opportunity at hand, and a little bit about our solution and what surgeons and patients think about it. Now we're going to tell you what we're doing to capitalize on this truly unique situation.
Thank you, Todd. So to bring this solution to women everywhere, we've developed an interdisciplinary team based on Northwestern graduate students and surgeons. In the top right, you'll see Dr. Dan McCarthy, who is currently a general surgery resident at Northwestern and has performed countless of these lumpectomy procedures. You also heard from Tyler, who's currently in medical school and business school and pursuing a master's in engineering management. I am also in business school and law school, and Curtis is a PhD student in electrical engineering. Other members of our team who are on that slide are also pursuing masters and PhDs in engineering, and 2 will finish their schooling in June and will be ready to join our team full-time. We have also developed several advisory boards to help us get to market as fast as possible and with the utmost efficiency and effectiveness. So if you look at the top row there, our clinical advisory board includes Dr. Kevin Bethke, who Tyler mentioned earlier, who is a world-renowned breast cancer surgeon and the most experienced breast cancer surgeon at Northwestern. You'll also see Dr. Rishi Arora, who is the director of experimental electrophysiology and has a lot of experience with the type of experimentation that we're doing and can help guide our engineering team on a daily basis. Our technical team includes academics such as Dr. Alan Sahakian, who is the head of the electrical engineering department at Northwestern, and also people from the business world, such as Bob Bell, the former CTO of Radiotherapeutics, which was a liver ablation company that sold to Boston Scientific in the early 2000s. And to round out our advisory boards, on the bottom row there, you'll see our commercialization board. And earlier, Tyler mentioned Vic Mobile. So our current needs allow Vic to give us free advice, which is really great because Vic, that probe that you guys saw earlier that was a liver ablation probe, Vic actually worked for that company, Rita Medical. He was in charge of sales and growth and helped them get sold in 2006 to AngioDynamics for $220 million. And that's the probe that's currently involved in this study that you saw earlier that we're improving upon very significantly. So Vic is a great advisor right now, but he has also promised that he would love to work for us full-time in the future when we're really ready to put one of these probes in the hands of surgeons throughout the country. And as soon as we go to market and get sufficient funding, we can hire people like Vic and certain other advisors who would like to work for us full-time in the future.
Where would those costs go? I don't see them in your financials.
We have actually built in the costs of hiring those individuals at a part-time basis into our financials because our financials go out about 18 months. And at that point, when we go to market 18 months from now, we'll have to either raise additional funding or...
Is it in your, did you allocate it as overhead in cost of goods? Because I see your G&A numbers and they're maybe low. They're not in G&A. Where are they?
Build those in.
Yeah, I have to take a look and see which version you have there, but we do have a sales compensation as a significant percentage that would actually get fed back into the sales force. And Vic, guys like Vic, the sales managers who would actually internally hire are compensated.
It's not in the COGS, but we did build into our overall financial projections. If we're having an issue with the version you have there,
Yeah, there's nothing in here for salaries. They have G&A is very low. It's $1,000. So I guess you're not being paid. You're not taking a salary and you're not paying anybody, I guess.
we're currently not taking a salary, but we do have, perhaps we need to show you our updated financials, but we've built in, so Tyler and I are not taking a salary, but we do have financials that demonstrate that we can have other full-time, I mentioned Adam and Tyler Graff, our other engineers will be full-time in June. And then people like Vic Muller, once we're ready to go to market in about 18 months. He's not currently building our financials on a full-time basis, but we do have financials that are updated. Perhaps in our appendix we can show you.
Okay, well, these ROIs are fitting the ones, the ROIs you showed up here, and then these don't have the salaries, so if you update the salaries and put that in here, then your ROIs are going to change. So it's not a big deal, just a mess, I think.
Sure. Yeah, I apologize. We do have, the salaries for those people.
Okay.
And it's updated.
And we'll see, doing the appendix slide later that we can get to. We'll try to circle back to your point.
Sure, no problem.
We mentioned intellectual property earlier, and I spoke a little bit about how our IP is differentiated from the existing pros on the market. So far we've filed a non-provisional US patent with a priority date of July 2012, as well as an international PCT filing that gives us that priority date globally. And that patent covers an expandable membrane that's part of a probe that can be inserted into a body cavity with a balloon that actually enlarges to fit that cavity perfectly. Recently, we also filed another provisional US patent just last month for new inventions, such as a hard piece probe with differentially expandable electrodes that can fit the cavity in a different way. And we'll continue to build our IP portfolio as our lab design and prototyping efforts continue. Tyler also alluded earlier to the fact that our patent portfolio allows us in the future to expand to other areas of the body. Our team is currently focused on destroying cancer in the breast, but our patents allow us to expand in the future to other markets, not only globally, breast cancer, but also to other areas of the body. We worked with a Chicago-based law firm, a Midwest-based law firm by the name of Polson Alley to make sure that our thoughts on our future IP strategy made a lot of sense, and we have a letter of support on file from a very experienced JD PhD that you see on the slide there in front of you, who said, yes, you should be able to get the proprietary position in the market that you are seeking based on your current IP strategy, and this will allow the expansion that I just mentioned. We talked a lot about what we're doing from a tech dev perspective, and now Curtis will give you a deeper look into what that is.
Can you talk about the rights that you have to the intellectual property, and how you're going to obtain those rights and the cost of it?
Absolutely. So you're absolutely right that because we're developing in labs and the surgeons at Northwestern has automatic assignment of the IP. However, we're working hand in hand on a daily basis with our technology transfer office, which is called INVO at Northwestern, if any of you have experience specifically with Northwestern. And we've received verbal confirmation that our upfront licensing costs will be nothing, although we will pay for reimbursement of the original patent prosecution. And then going forward, there will be a license. We currently have an option for an exclusive license. And we've also received verbal confirmation that we can extend that option for only $1,000, which is built into our financials. And then we actually have the license going forward, which will convert in about a year. Then we'll give them some equity. We talked about what those numbers should look like. And we have confirmation that we'll be able to get that license and that the upfront costs should be done.
Yeah, but we do have exclusive options to license the technology out of Northwestern. And all of the inventors of the technology are involved with the company, either as an advisor or on the team, including myself.
I was asking, the question, so that these are all U.S. applications at this time?
We have the international PCT filing, so that stands for Patent Cooperation Treaty, and it gives you a priority date. So that doesn't mean that we have a patent in every country in the world, but it does mean that mostly every country is involved in the PCT, and it means that we have the priority date of July 2012. So we have 30 to 31 months, depending on the country, to file those patents. And we're in constant communication with our external IP lawyer, because I'm a law student. I'm not pretending to be a licensed attorney. I'm a law student, but we have 2 attorneys who we work with on a day-to-day basis, one for general corporate needs and one specifically for intellectual property.
How much have you budgeted, for patent prosecution?
So prosecution, we actually won't hear back from the USPTO to begin prosecution until it should be 2 years from now. But we budgeted a lot of money for additional provisionals, which doesn't cost that much, but when we convert those provisionals to non-provisionals in the US, that costs about $10,000 to $12,000 per patent. And then internationally, it's different based on every country. For all of the EU countries, it's about $7,500. And then let's say, for example, Japan is about $3,000. Everything else is usually lower. So I have a whole spreadsheet that budgets that out. If we go to every country that we could ever want globally, it's about $45,000 for each patent.
Now, are you going to manage that internally, or are you contracting that out, with the IP Council?
IP Council.
And what's the rate?
His rates are generous and flexible, but those numbers that I just gave you includes not only the fee to actually get the patents in the foreign countries, but also what you have to pay the attorney. So that was both built into the same number. Fortunately, our IP lawyer he has his own practice. He has 3 people who work for him, and he designed his whole fee structure based on working with startups, and he never takes any equity. So he's a great guy to work with, and I can certainly give his name later.
Give a slide anyway.
Do you put those, do you think those costs are maybe in R&D? I don't see them in the budget, but I'm guessing they're maybe in R&D.
We have them in the ask a little bit later to show. A little bit later. I'll show you
We've
exactly
got
what they are.
a healthy R&D budget here, so I'm just guessing that's where it's at.
I think you're right, and I think that we might be able to clarify. Your questions are very good, and hopefully one of our slides later will get to them, but you might be right about that version you're looking at.
I'll get to the itemized budget of exactly what everything's going for in the next 18 months, I promise.
Is it okay with you if we get back to you on that?
Oh, yeah, no problem, no problem.
Thank you.
I'm sure it's here.
I imagine it's not your mistake. We'll get back to it. We have a great slide for you. Okay, are we ready for? Thank you.
So our technology development is based on a proven and vetted process used by many medical device companies, as well as it's recognized by the FDA and it's recommended by them. We've broken this process down into 3 phases, starting with the proof of concept phase, which we hope to complete by the end of 2014. Phase 2, which is entering preclinical trials or completing these preclinical trials. And finally, phase 3, first in man studies and regulatory submission and approval. I'll explain a little more about phase 1 and our iterative design process. We start by using finite element analysis, a computational modeling technique that allows us to examine our device in virtual operation with scientific principles. What we do is we take a model of our design and we insert it into a virtual breast cavity that has the same characteristics as human breast tissue. This is a graphical description of our probe ablating this virtual cavity. You see through this depiction that our design is able to ablate to the required depth. After we ensure that our design is valid, we're able to translate this design into a CAD model for manufacturing. Finally, we realize these models with rapid prototyping to produce our prototype right here in my hand. This prototype is then evaluated on a bench top using a temperature-dependent human breast tissue analog. Essentially what happens is it will change color once the energy required for ablation is reached. This prototype is hooked up into a generator and is run for 15 minutes to ensure ablation. I'll now show you a video of the aftermath of ablation where you can see that the temperature change indicates that the tissue has indeed been ablated.
So I just want to make sure there are no questions about what you just saw on the screen there. The hot pink color was where we've reached the temperature and the energy transfer needed for human ablation, which is coagulation of protein around 50 degrees Celsius. And the dark purple on the outside would be the tissue that is untouched, unchanged, remains healthy.
As Tyler mentioned before, we have been working with a strategic contract manufacturer who would help us bring our device to commercialization. We've put their quote in line with our phases to demonstrate that the amount of cost required to take our device from our current concept to the market.
Okay, so let's circle back to regulatory and what it's going to take. We've already spoken with somebody from the FDA, since one of our co-founders worked at the FDA and got in contact with this person to support our hypothesis that we're eligible for 510K, the advanced approval process with the FDA. We even have a product code picked out that he's assured we can get, and that's GEI for general ablation. We also are working with a regulatory consultant from the East Coast who's been recommended by a lot of people and has done specific work in this type of technology. And she's helping us get just as far of an indication as we'll need to go to market and just seeing how far we can push that. And for now, we're going for ablation of soft tissue post-resection. She's also helping us pick our predicate devices, including some of the devices you've seen before.
What is she gonna charge?
She charges her entire fee for whole memos, $25,000. So we phase that out to actually start with an earlier, around $5,000 installment, and then once we raise our next round, fill it out for the full memo for the approval. In terms of reimbursement, then this is what I was talking about earlier. Up above is the cost of what a hospital like Northwestern actually pays for those liver ablation programs. Actually pays. And by looking at the breast space, competitors like these intraoperative, these ionizing radiation solutions, they charge for under the CPT code for 19499, and they're able to garner a whole nother approximately $1,800 for the center to cover the costs of the device. That's just with currently existing codes. And we hope to follow the trajectory of advising companies and get new codes made just for breast cancer at a higher rate. But the surgeon also gets compensated a few more $100, hence the incentive to adopt the technology. We started speaking with payers about this, and they've already indicated that this is something that we'll get paid for, mostly because it's a major cost saver, as well as much more convenient for their patients. And lastly, in terms of financing, this is the actual itemized quote for our next 18-month round of funding to get this thing through any preclinical milestone necessary to move on to clinical work. As you can see, actually baked in here is the exact cost from the contract manufacturers that it will cost to get all the way through their first 3 phases and get us to a clinical start. It includes the cost of an animal trial, the regulatory costs, including the $25,000 consultant which you asked for, the wages and labor of our first manager, co-founder Adam Piotrowski, are baked into this, as well as an engineer, Tyler Groff. And then at the very end of things, somebody like Big Mel to come in for the last 6 months of this round and transition towards our next round. In terms of marketing, we already have a marketing consultant picked out that we would work with actually from the West Coast, and baked into this is also her fees, as well as the legal costs for our IP counsel and our general counsel for 18 months.
So these figures might be slightly updated from what you're looking at in front of you,
Yes.
which might be
Right.
the source of
Yeah.
the discrepancy. But we have a very sophisticated spreadsheet that's more involved than what you see in front of you that backs up all of these numbers.
Over what period of time?
This is 18 months. 18
That
months.
actually gets you to what?
This gets us to this milestone. At the end of this is the value-added milestone of proving this technology with updated prototypes from our contract manufacturer in an animal model, with the type of data that would be used in a regulatory FDA 510K.
So this is, we've done all the animal trials, and after this, we're ready to go first in man, which is what they call human trials.
Great.
This also includes the documentation from the contract manufacturer of design controls of the medical device that would be submitted to do the clinical trial as well.
Now,
And-
where are you going for funding for this?
I'll talk about that right now. So far in the last few months, we've been able to raise $50,000 of non-dilutive funding via business plan competitions and similar type things. We hope to continue out the rest of this spring in the business plan circuit picture, including here, to raise as much non-dilutive capital as possible before applying for the SBR's TTR grant in the August deadline, and then closing the round with investment. And we already have a few angel investors lined up.
And you're
Fantastic.
primarily going for angels?
Primarily going for an angel round, but we're not set up yet.
And when Tyler says non-dilutive, this is all free money. So right now, we've gotten money that has been given to us in grant form. And then what's really nice, the NCAA is up there on the screen in front of you, and they said to us, right now, we'll promise to match up to $50,000. So this number that we have, $50,000, does not take account of the fact that should we get another 50 investment right now, the NCAA will follow on with another 50.
So if anyone wants to invest in here, whatever you match up to 50 will be matched. Now, this idea has already started getting a little bit of traction and publicity, and I think this is really what's driven the investors to kind of seek us out and ask about what we're doing and gain interest. And why should they? Besides, doing something that's financially helpful to them, we're helping women like Jeannie and the millions of other women out there that you may know who are unfortunate enough to deal with breast cancer. We are Innoblative, and we are innovating the treatment of breast cancer.
I believe we have another moment if you have any further questions. Do you have the appendix slide?
Tell me a little bit more about your go-to-market strategy and the way I like to think about it is financials are merely estimates,
Sure.
particularly at this particular point in time. So talk to me a little bit about how you might get to the first $1 million of revenue. Who specifically would you start to target first and foremost, and how would you go about it?
Sure. So, we kind of have 2 major value propositions here that are important to
Yes.
delineate. One is that we're sort of offering a device that will reduce the number of reoperations, and that's a cost saver. And that's something that we can show within 6 days after surgery. So that's kind of the indication, if you will. That's what we're going for first to get the initial sales. And then we plan to start a real clinical trial in humans to show over the course of a few years that we can actually be as equivalent to radiation therapy, which the liver probes have already shown. It's just that they've been a crappy device. So the idea is to go to market under that sort of first indication and garner the initial sales using Vic Malik as our sales manager and have him contract out a sales force just like he's done for his previous companies. And that's how we hope to get the first few sales.
Are there particular sites that you go to first rather than others, and why?
Absolutely. So Tyler mentioned earlier that a rural market is a really good place for us to start because women diagnosed in rural markets have to either move, and for radiation therapy that means move for 5 to 7 weeks. And people who are not either able or willing to do that have to choose a mastectomy or forego that extra margin of safety. So if we go to rural markets, this probe is very inexpensive compared to the capital expenditure of radiation therapy. We can easily deliver that probe to rural markets where women currently don't have the option of the type of local therapy that we're discussing. Also, people Tyler mentioned earlier who have already received radiation therapy are ineligible for additional radiation because it's so dangerous. So we can also help those women who don't otherwise have this option of local treatment.
And currently we're working with a few surgeons who are early adopters of local technology, including Dr. Bethke. So he's very familiar with all the local varieties out there and familiar with using them. And so that's really it's in terms of academic centers who we're going to target first, people who are familiar with the local treatments.
I might miss this, but the capital structure as it exists right now is what?
Sure.
The capital
Equity?
Yeah, who owns what, right?
Absolutely. So you can speak.
You spoke about equity and somebody getting equity down the road, and
Sure.
who owns it now?
Sure. So the majority of the company is actually owned by the students who helped start the company and our advisors who helped start the company. So between the founders, the founding surgeons, and the founding team, we own almost all of the equity for the company, and we have a vesting schedule in place to kind of distribute that and room to bring on experienced individuals in the future.
So we have a Delaware C Corp, we have a 4-year vesting plan. We have a very small allotment that's already been, for anyone who has any questions about how this works, the way the vesting works is everyone actually owns their equity, but they can't do anything with it until they vest. And we have a 1-year cliff. So if anybody leaves the company, any of those 4 founders who have the share of the main piece of the equity, they don't get to bring their equity with them if they leave the company. But everyone's pretty excited, so we think we'll be able to move forward mostly all of the core team. And we have a small amount of equity set aside for an employee stock option plan. Those have not yet been distributed. And then the principal investigator, Dr. Mavi, you saw on the slide there, he has about 3%. And he's only vesting 1% over 3 years because his day-to-day involvement is more helping us with meetings and advising. He's not in the lab working on a
How
day-to-day
big is this
basis.
option pool? What percent is the option pool?
The option pool, actually, we were advised to hold back on the option pool until we finish this first round, and then it's been estimated to go at 7% for the next round. And so we've gotten some advice to hold off on structuring that exact options pool until we finish the C round.
Any idea, last question, any idea on what the valuation is going to be on those options?
We're not exactly sure what the valuation is going to be on those options, but we're moving towards that. But there's one thing for sure: we're waiting to actually try to get this company and the options value until we move in with our contract manufacturer. Because one of the companies that actually, one of our peer companies who won the life science track at Rice last year, Rice Business Plan competition, has been working with us on really helping us pull us along. And they tripled their valuation just by partnering with the strategic manufacturer that we talked about and who we have a quote on the table for. So we're waiting, actually, that's why we're waiting to take any money until we've seen how much we can get with grant funding, and then figure it out, move into their triple our valuation, and then close out the angel terms of agreement through the company.
And the reason for that multiple is that partner that we've been in discussions with, they're really experts in industrial design, which is integral to the value proposition that we can offer to surgeons. And I just want to follow on. Oh, go ahead.
You're continuing that
No, go
thought.
ahead.
I just wanted to be able to ask for more details around the structure of the sales. I see in the budget there was a selling commission, and it looks like it's 25, 30% of revenue.
Yeah, so we actually use existing medical device companies in the liver ablation space and use their exact ratios to show what it might be 5 or 6 years out. So all those plowback ratios you see for selling, for example, are actually what one of these specific liver companies uses. So exactly what it's going to look like in 7 years, we're not sure. So we use analog companies to estimate that. So actually, all those plowback ratios that you see are ablation company plowback ratios to justify those. Any other questions?
That's about time.
Thank you very much.